Amy loved her college years. Varsity basketball, student leadership, lifelong friendships. But life got busy, and over time, she drifted away from her alma mater. Then, an email changed everything. A student, just like she once was, needed advice. It wasn't a donation ask. It wasn't a long-term commitment, just a chance to help. Amy answered, suggesting a call. It took minutes, but for Jacqueline, it meant everything. A real connection. The advancement team saw Amy was engaged. They reached out, not for a gift, but to thank her. To invite her back into the community. Amy realized how much she missed being part of this world. She joined a panel. She met students. She felt the impact she could have. And when the time came, giving back wasn't a question. It felt like the next step. This is the power of Protopia. Not another alumni engagement platform. Not another fundraising tool. A smarter way to engage alumni where they are, creating real connections that lead to real impact. See the ripple effect in action. Visit protopia.co today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for listening to Alumless for August 1st, 2025. This is the Exploring the National Alumni Survey edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood. I am joined by CMAC founder and CEO, Chris Marshall. Chris, what's going on, man?
Hola, senor.
Chris is joining us from Mexico today, yeah?
Yeah, I am on a little family vacation. I work in the mornings while the family's sleeping, and then I join them for a pool day later today. So it's a rough life right now.
Well, you are so dedicated to creating content for our listeners that this was a no-brainer. We're going to forge ahead with a live Alumless today, which is fantastic. Amen. We're glad to make the show happen today. Excited for it. We got a special episode on Alumless. We talk about constituent engagement strategies and education advancement, and we are live today. So please say hello in the comments section on LinkedIn so that we know who you are, who's listening in, where you're listening in from. If you are also on vacation like Chris is in Mexico, tell us that too. We're grateful for you for taking some time. If you want to hear the bonus segment that we produce on every episode, please subscribe to the podcast edition of the show. And we're grateful to Max Leiston and the team at Protopia for being Alumless presenting sponsor. And also a big congrats to Max and for his presentation with our friend Josh Harriman at Case Summit today, where they were talking about the Ohio State Protopia partnership. It was an awesome presentation. So glad that they're doing so well at Protopia. All right, Chris, special episode today. We're going to talk about the National Alumni Survey, but maybe you can just talk a little bit about why we're highlighting it.
Yeah, my sound coming through okay, Ryan? Hey to Matt Winston. Lola, I'm with you on your chat comment. We should be having this live all in person in Mexico together. Sarah, good to see you, and welcome Paul on the chat. So I am really excited about this. This is something that Howard Heevner and his colleagues at RNL previously had ran for a couple of years now. And the instrument itself, the work that's come out of it has been so important to our industry that I think it's critical. It's something that we continue, and we're thrilled that the National Alumni Survey can partner with Washburn McGoldrick and CMAC on this initiative going forward. So I'm really pumped about it. I'm excited to have Howard join us. And in fact, Ryan, we should get out of you and I and get Howard, Sarah, and Bonnie on here as quick as possible as far as I'm concerned, because they're the real stars for this show.
We're definitely going to do that. Well, let's just talk a little bit before we bring them out about what's been the most interesting aspect to you so far about the giving landscape and the National Alumni Survey, what it's revealed so far. And we're going to dig deep into this, but just at the top of the show, kind of what's been the most interesting to you?
Plenty of highlights, plenty of details, but the one that stands out to me by far is that when we look at alumni giving rates and they're declining everywhere, even though we're doing a better job of tracking engagement, vice presidents for advancement are asking, what impact is it having? Is it helping us with our giving rates? And the answer right now is it's really not. We're seeing declines nationally. There are a few places that are holding steady, very few that are going up. In fact, if you're on the call now and you want to share where you guys are, is your percentage going down, holding steady, or going up? And your dollar levels, the other thing that people are measuring, of course, are dollars up, down, or even. All important information. But what the survey told us is that alums are philanthropic. Even our young alums, at a very high percentage, are philanthropic to other causes, they're just not philanthropic to us and to alma mater. And that's the big red flag that went up for me, Ryan, is that we have people, a generation and a population of people who are in fact giving. They're just not giving to their institutions. And I think it has to do with the way we're asking them, what we're asking for, how we're asking. There's all kinds of who's asking. And Howard and the team that have done the work at NAS have started to uncover some of these things that are really, I think, insightful and I think could change the landscape for annual giving. But if you think about it in the long term, Ryan, of course, any work we do now in the annual giving space is going to ultimately lead to whether or not people are going to give at higher levels in the future. So this is the beginning of our pipeline. And when we talk about this work, we talk about pipeline development. So I think it's critical. And that was the one major finding in this survey data that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, the results would seem to indicate that we got to do something different with respects to engagement and how we're building communities with generosity at its core and how we think about this whole thing. All right, well, let's bring out our awesome guests today. We've got 3 panelists today for the first time, I think, ever. Like, we brought out one at a time previously, but we've got 3 folks on the screen. It's awesome to bring out Howard Heevner. Howard is Vice President and Senior Consultant at CMAC, but he is also by day, of course, Executive Director of Annual Programs at Cal Berkeley. Our friend and partner, Bonnie Devlin, is Managing Principal and Co-owner of Washburn McGoldrick. Hey, Bonnie. And we also have Sarah Kleeberger, who is Senior Consultant at Ruffalo, Noel, Levitz. I'm glad to have you all on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Good morning.
First question is over to Howard. Howard, let's talk a little bit about the origin story of the National Alumni Survey. Where did the National Alumni Survey come from, and where are we today with it?
Yeah, so origin stories. A few years ago, I think that as all of us have been seeing what's been happening and then the kind of the trends with the alumni giving, donor counts, and had a lot of concerns about that, and had some great conversations with my partners at Ruffalo, Noel, Levitz, and we conspired to create a variety of research projects. And in fact, I'm not going to lie, the alumni survey was not my original idea. It was in fact from some partner conversations we had. I was on a different path, and the more we talked about this alumni survey work, the more it became clear it's what we really needed. We needed to maybe stop looking inward for our answers, looking to ourselves, looking to our community. And what we needed to do was actually ask the people that we're reaching out to actually to find out what they think. And so Ruffalo Noel Levitz very generously funded the first 2 years of the project, and we had great success over those 2 years with 36 institutions and over 70,000 alumni surveys completed to be able to give us this body of work and this information that allows us to really talk about what people feel about philanthropy in the higher education landscape, and how we are or aren't meeting the needs of our constituents, and where we are today is that R&L last spring and I had a great conversation about where this all goes, and how do we grow the footprint, and how do we grow the impact. And what we came to was that we wanted to try a different approach where we're pulling in partners from different parts of the industry and a little more of a cohort kind of based like pathway for this. I am incredibly grateful that R&L has stayed involved, and our primary sponsor on top of Washburn McGoldrick and CMAC this year is R&L is also coming in as a sponsor as well. So it's still involved with us, and we're in those stages of getting schools signed up who are interested in participating in the National Alumni Survey this year. We're still able to, through the generosity of the folks on this call, as well as the folks at R&L, to offer a base survey for free for folks, with an opportunity if someone wants to add some custom questions to do so at a nominal fee, and with the aspiration to get to 75,000 plus alumni surveys completed this year, and add that to the body of work. And it's just super exciting. It's an exciting time, and the ability to really to dig in deeper to understand what is actually happening. How are we in the space that we're in? And what do we do together to change the way we speak to our alumni and how we reflect to them that we heard them? So that's probably more answer than you asked for, Ryan, but I just kind of kept rolling. So
yeah, well, it's great setup to kind of understand more about the National Alumni Survey and where we are today. Sarah, now that we're in the third year of the project, as you've observed the growth of the NAS, what gets you most excited about the project and where this can go?
Yeah, and you know, again, just to take a step back, it kind of feels like we've been at it maybe a bit longer. As Howard mentioned, given prior work, which included the Schuler Young Alumni Initiative, and that started back in 2019. It was a 3-year initiative, and part of that work involved a young alumni survey designed to capture feedback from recent grads. Today, because of the collaboration with Howard, we've built this national research project, obviously inviting alumni of all generations to participate. As Howard referenced, we grew from 20,000 responses in fall of 2023 to more than 50,000 responses in fall of 2024. I think we better gear up because I just heard him say he wants to double the count again. And it feels like we've got a good shot at that, especially with the support this year from CMAC and the expertise we're tapping into with Bonnie and the Washburn McGoldrick team. So I think we're excited about more alumni participating. We're excited about increasing diversity among the responses. Last year, about 15% of participants identified as alumni of color. We're hopeful we can increase that percentage. It's a priority for Howard, I know, and for all of us. We're grateful to Angelique Grant, to Ricky McCurry at the Inclusion Firm for really helping spread the word. We want to encourage more HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions to join the effort. And I think we're also excited about expanding or deepening the analysis. You know, there's this tremendous amount of data that's collected, and I think as we lean on talented folks like Dan and Steve at Washburn McGoldrick, it feels like we're going to be able to sort of fully nerd out and really dig into the data. We'll be able to do some longitudinal analysis. Again, as Howard mentions, there's this big body of work, so that's exciting. We'd love to do some more benchmarking this year, so there's a lot to be excited about for sure.
2 observations. One, the number of books behind Sarah is intimidating. And number 2, I want to make it clear, not more of a statement than observation, is that the National Alumni Survey is open to any school, any institution, and it will be completely free if you want to do it in the way we have set it up. We have a sort of a standard template. It's when you go into customizing questions, benchmarking and comparing, there's another conversation to have about what the fees would be for that kind of work. But any school, the accessibility of this is so great that any school can say, we're in. We just need your data to be able to do it. So I'm excited about that. But anyway, back to my question. Bonnie, I know you've been in the industry for a long time, and I know you started when you were 9 years old. 50 years in, what does this mean for the advancement industry? Having this kind of an instrument that we, hopefully for years we'll do this every fall. What does it mean for the advancement industry?
Thanks, Chris. It's such an important question. It's one of the reasons why we're so excited to be involved in this, because I think what it's going to give us is a national resource where we can look at it across the board in terms of all sorts of institutions, public, private, liberal arts colleges, universities, HBCUs, women's colleges, and to be able to understand some of the underlying patterns and those shifts in patterns over time. We know there are generational differences in giving already. We've seen that. We talked about that at the very beginning in terms of the fact that many of our youngest alums are actually quite generous and inclined to give, but just not to higher education. So being able to use this information, to use this data as a way to guide programs and to guide solicitations, and in general, to understand better how people are motivated to support their institution or not, because there's a lot of resources go into that. And let's face it, we're in a challenging time right now for many institutions in terms of their budgets and the resources available to them. We can't afford to keep making the same mistakes. We need to be able to find ways to reach and inspire, motivate, and engage people to be able to support and to be able to tell that story of why that matters, I think is going to be really important. And we'll be able to make some good data-driven decisions based on the results. I also dream of being able to have this for a very long time, to be able to use this and to track longitudinally what's happening.
Great if down the road, Bonnie, we were telling the story of the upswing, right? We went through this period and then we figured it out, right? And now we see
exactly
this trend.
Exactly right. And I think that's, so much of this ends up being driven, sometimes very short term. And I think the ability to be able to look at it for the long term, the parallel I would see is what we're able to do. Washburn McGoldrick is a member of the Giving Institute, and Giving USA every year now for over 40 years has come out with tracking the patterns of giving overall. This gives us a really great snapshot and probably in even greater detail for higher education.
Yeah. I see some of the folks in the chat chiming in here. Shout out to Dan Nugent down at Stockton in Jersey. He read the last comment was what I hear almost every client talk about: dollars up, donors down. So percentages are down, but dollars are holding or going up. That's what we're hearing, Bonnie, right? Around the country.
Yeah, it's that great divide.
Yep. And that's true about public, small, liberal arts, elite. Those schools that used to have 60% giving rates are in the mid 40s now. I mean,
that's right. That's right. And a number that many of our clients would be happy to have. But for those, and I think about some of our clients who fall into that category where they've always had, and they have they have very strong engagement. They've been in the engagement work for a long time, and they know that their alums really do engage in other ways, but they are seeing the decline in terms of the financial support. And
I'm going to flip it back to Howard, Bonnie, and ask him. I gave my observation as to the thing that stood out most to me. Howard, two parts. What stood out most to you? And then let's get practical here. How are you using this data at Cal to inform how you are doing the work on the ground every day at a major institution?
Yeah. I think that the thing for me is in the conversation you and Bonnie were just having, right? About donors down, dollars up, and that story that is just repeated over and over again. And I think the thing that's come out of the survey for me is kind of spoken to me in a deeper level is the generations have changed, but we haven't. We're changing alumni engagement work. That's been happening for a while, but the annual giving space has not kept up with those changes, right? You have this really disconnected experience where alumni engagement tends to be pretty much choose your own adventure kind of, or connected to who you are in a way. Major gifts work is connected to who you are. And in between, this pipeline work is pretty much forced choice solicitations, right? It is putting people into these baskets by necessity, by resource in a lot of ways. And then kind of forcing them into these pathways. And I think one of the things that came out of this data that was really kind of spoke to me is that when we asked people what they were most interested in giving to and laid out a list of options, right? Things like the specific part of the campus or student group or mental health services or area of greatest need, which we use as coded for unrestricted. That unrestricted part was the lowest ranked piece for all generations that we looked at. So, and it is a necessity for us to rethink the way we approach unrestricted fundraising right now. It doesn't mean, here's the deal, right? Unrestricted is always going to be a necessity, institutionally needed. But we have, for some reason, for generations, acted as if the donors or the prospects or the alumni who have illustrated to us they have the lowest amount of trust to us, right? Because they've not made a gift, maybe they're not engaging much, these non-donors, right? We have continued to expect that somehow they're going to become a donor by giving to the funds that require the highest trust, right? Our unrestricted funds require the highest amount of trust, but we ask these low trust donors to give these high trust spaces. And I think the thing that I am reflecting on in my own work at Cal and CMAC is how do we create space where donors have greater choice? How do we think about our first 6 or 7 gifts a donor makes in their giving experience being trust building, reflecting back to them great stewardship, great accountability, understanding the process and the system. And so we're trying to do things like that at Berkeley, really trying to focus a lot of our energy on how we grow digital giving spaces like giving days and crowdfunding and different types of giving day kind of experiences, because those are places where donors really do have a chance to really express themselves through giving by finding that place on campus that matters to them most. We try to offer, for example, for Big Give, our giving day, we offer like I want to say 800 different options. And I know that saying that there are many people are going to have give me the furrow of brow, but I'll tell you, it works. We're getting lots and lots of new donors. Big Give is our #1 source of new donors to campus now. And that to me is really creating more opportunities for donor choice is by far the most important thing we can do. The lowest bar we can do in a lot of ways is just creating those spaces, using those digital giving platforms as a way to create more donor choice.
Yeah.
And the old model, Howard, that we have seen many schools using is the give to the unrestricted fund. And in the eyes of younger donors, that's the black hole fund. And I don't not trust the institution. Yeah. I'm not trusting to put my money there. Right?
Well, we're still thinking that loyalty is going to carry the message, right? Like this idea that like that's at the base too. Is like this idea that we can use a loyalty construct of Gen Z and millennials and expect that they're going to give because we expect them to, versus the recognition that they have switched to a values-based construct and we need to change our thinking to align with that instead of sitting in rooms, which I'm sure we've all sat in and had conversations. Well, they're not giving. Clearly something wrong with them. We need to teach
them how to give to our construct.
Right. Yeah. And instead of recognizing maybe they're just not picking up what we're putting down and we have to think differently about the way we approach them. And a lot of that has come out of this survey data. The survey data is so critical in understanding what people actually care about. And we have to do better about reflecting that back to them.
Yeah.
Bonnie, I want to bring you back in and then get Sarah back in before we run up against time here in the live portion of the show. John, thanks for your question. We touched on this is a John Valva's question in the chat. I think we addressed it a little bit in the first couple of minutes, but I think in the podcast edition we'll touch back on the mechanics of it. Bonnie, there was a lot of talk about this National Alumni Survey during the Washburn McGoldrick client conference back in June. What were some of the main things that you were hearing from those who were in attendance about the reaction to Chris and Howard's presentation and the data?
Thanks, Ryan. And I just want to reinforce Howard's comment about unrestricted. And, remember, that's an accounting term. That it's about the least motivating term at all. Right. But part of what I was hearing in the conversations, both during the conference and afterwards, and I know Howard posed this to the group and had very few people raise their hands, but then people talked to me about it in our one-on-one sessions over the past month. And that's that they recognize the need to do exactly what Howard just described. But one of the roadblocks they're facing is the accounting system itself and the demands on them, particularly as budgets are tighter and tighter, to be able to have more flexible money to spend from the CFOs. And an example of a client with their best year ever, and that was across the board. But the amount of unrestricted cash coming in through an annual fund that also has restricted options has continued to decline. See, in an example like this, we can use some of the NAS data to be able to have conversations with CFOs and with frankly with board members about the changing attitudes and the way in which the work has to change to understand better how we're going to be more successful and in the annual giving space and even calling it annual giving, I think is something that should be up for grabs in terms of that. But understanding the changes that can be made and therefore build the pipeline. This particular institution has a great group of donors from the 80s and the 90s, for example. If you're going to have that pipeline for future campaigns, you need to find a way that you can meet them where they are.
Sarah, you've had the chance to introduce the National Alumni Survey to your partners at RNL. Talk a little bit about how they've received the survey, and are they using it for decision-making purposes? What have you noticed about how they've been interacting with and absorbing the data?
Yeah, response has been good. I love it because the market research is really actionable, and that feels pretty important. Many partners have used the NAS data to help make decisions about, how to prioritize budget dollars, staff resources, their program planning. As Howard referenced, it can inform, messaging or your crowdfunding campaigns, giving campaigns. It certainly helps highlight, as we are ticking through some of the response options, highlights, events and communication channels that are of interest and value. And I think we can use the data not just to consider, okay, where should we spend time and energy, but it also helps on the flip side of that. Maybe what doesn't resonate so much, what should we stop doing? And we'd certainly argue those questions should be part of the exercise or the conversation. Maybe I'd also point to the value of the companion data file. So, that's one of the deliverables for each participating institution. Again, very actionable, but partners have used that file to help with portfolio assignments, discovery work, lead generation. For example, we can identify constituents who are philanthropic and report giving at higher levels, maybe through a donor advised fund or estate plan, and also raise their hands to indicate very strong satisfaction with their experience at the university. So, an interesting cohort to really, nurture and spend some time with. Maybe another sort of practical example, we can identify a subset of alumni with high current connection who are philanthropic. So as we've touched on earlier, they're giving elsewhere, but not giving financially to the college or university. And if we think about sort of smarter targeted acquisition or maybe even a volunteer engagement, it might make a lot of sense to focus on that group with some higher touch outreach. So lots of ways the National Alumni Survey is useful. From our perspective, it can really help point us in the right direction, provide clarity and focus. And maybe one final note, sort of circling back to what Bonnie just referenced. As part of NAS, we're often working most closely with annual giving and alumni relations staff, but there's certainly opportunity to bring colleagues and stakeholders together from across campus for a readout of the findings. I mean, the market research is relevant for everybody. So it can be a great moment for the advancement team to share a lot of this really rich data and intelligence with internal partners, executive leadership, boards, all of the above. And that's something that feels pretty valuable as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And for listeners, we are going to call a mid-show audible here, and we're just going to keep going. We've got a good live conversation. We've got a great live audience tuned in, some really good comments in the chat. So you know what? We're just going to press on. Howard, I'm going to ask the next question to you, but maybe before you address it, talk a little bit about John Valva's question, which is about, for those who are less familiar with the mechanics, who among our alumni gets surveyed? When does the survey occur? Is it co-branded? What types of questions are there? So start with that. And then the next question for you is talk about the vision for the alumni survey. Will it be international? I saw a question about independent schools. Can they participate? And what will we be high-fiving about 3 years from now as we've gathered?
A 9-part question for Howard, right?
Yeah, there was like, you need to condense that into like 3.5 to 4 minutes.
Ryan, you can't contain me. Okay, so here's the thing. I also want to just say a couple things to, before I get to your 9-part question. I think the thing that we also want to make sure we're really clear on, right, about unrestricted is we need to have a really honest evaluation about unrestricted. Where are those dollars coming from? It's not coming from those donors below $1,000. It's coming from donors in 1,000, 100,000. We have made this assumption that the only time a donor stops giving to where they've always given to is when they reach a major gift level, right? That's the way we have acted in the past, is that when a donor gets to 25,000, 100,000, all of a sudden they're going to start giving, they'll start giving someplace new, but they won't do that at $1,000. So there is a disconnect in this idea that we can't have donors starting someplace else at those lower dollar amounts and not be able to, and we can then convert them at $1,000 to an unrestricted donor once we build trust. So it is a leap of faith that this is actually how this can work. But the reality is that the unrestricted question is not going to be solved off the back of low-level donors. It's going to be solved more from how we deploy leadership and gift officers to kind of tackle that space. So I just wanted to jump in on that for a second, because I think that's a really important thing to reflect on. The other thing that I would just kind of, sorry, I'll go to John's question. So John Valva, our dear friend of a long time, is asking really great questions about the mechanics of the survey. So the alumni population that gets the survey is really determined by the institution who's participating. I think we've had some schools who've given us smaller portions and given us full portions. I think I prefer a full portion because you can do that segmentation later. We're in the process right now of getting schools to express interest. Once interest is expressed, our colleagues at Washburn will reach out to kind of get details firmed up and to make sure that all the questions are answered about some of the really detailed mechanics of it, and with the goal of doing the surveying through this fall, so that by the end of the fall we're able to have all that compiled and hopefully back in institutions' hands. The way the outreach works is that the institution is asked to send an introductory email. This is pretty standard survey stuff. It just says, we partnered with these folks to do this, and be on the lookout for their messages. And then we send a series of 3 emails that reference the original message and invite them to participate. The questions, I think, John, are really are probably more philanthropic in nature than maybe some of our standard alumni surveys, but do get into things like volunteering and what type of volunteer service people are doing outside the institution, not just in higher education, but also elsewhere. There's some communications questions and so forth. So there's a wide variety, as much as you can do with a relatively tight survey, because we don't want to have people spending 3 days trying to fill out the survey because they'll never finish it. The institutions that participate, the way they get results is that there will be, or the results they get, there's a data file with individual constituent level responses, right, per person, their actual responses that you can cut and dissect to the best of your ability. There's also a summary report, that overview of kind of what the trends were and what things were observable within the data, and so that's also delivered to the institution. And then finally, of course, being part of the National Alumni Survey overall project. So it's just a little bit of the taste of it. I certainly, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Sarah to ask questions about it. You can also find more information at the National Alumni Survey LinkedIn page, where we've been posting, or at least I've been posting, a fair amount of things about being part of the survey. So anyway, those are all things to be thinking about. The future of the alumni survey, from my perspective, I mean, 3 years from now, I'd love to be at a place where we have 500,000 alumni surveys from across the country, where we're able to really dig in and ask some really big questions around identity-based relationships to institutions, HBCUs, HSIs, and so forth. I'm really interested in actually the gender dynamics, gender identity as part of this as well, and far as like, how are we doing and connecting with our female identified population versus our male? Because I think there's some nuance in there that we're missing, that we're living in a construct, or in these pieces, or this network this strategy that's really built around a particular set of identities, and we need to be expanding that and thinking differently, and thinking about things like collective giving. How do we offer opportunities where people can give in the collective? And so I think that a lot of this research can help really fuel that. As far as expanding populations, I think that is to be determined. If you are an independent school on this and you are interested, I would say sign up. And if we can get a collective, or a big enough number of independent schools who are interested, I think that we've had some conversations about doing a second round of surveying specifically focused on those type of schools. So I think there's opportunities there. So it's going to take a little time to figure some of that stuff out. I haven't even thought about international yet. I think that I'm right now excited to get kind of the US kind of part figured out. I think the independent schools represent a lot of opportunity. I would love to look at Canadian schools as well. And then there's just so much. I think that I struggle with international is there's a lot of differences in the cultural context of philanthropy in different internationally. And when you talk to colleagues, whether it be from South America or from Europe, and you talk about their experience and the systemic structures around philanthropy are just so different. I have had an opportunity to get to know a colleague from Chile, and he talks about philanthropy and about it's like 10 entities that make most of philanthropic support. It's just so very different that I think that we would want to be really thoughtful before we get into that space, just from a cultural perspective. So, but the goal here is to continue to go deeper in the data, to do longitudinal work. And I also want to I want to stop for a second because I'm remiss in saying my deep gratitude to Chris and Bonnie and our partners at CMAC and Washburn McGoldrick for welcoming this project into the fold and the investments they're making to help make this happen, and to really continue to align with this vision of being able to offer this base survey for free to institutions who want to participate, so that we can grow this knowledge, that we can really answer some of these questions and really have this impact. And so, so anyway, I could continue on, Ryan, but I know that I'm probably deep into my 3 minutes.
I think you covered all 9 parts of that question.
I added a bonus one too. I don't know if you noticed that. I added my own bonus question in there, so I do what I can.
John, here, throw this one out real quick. Back to John Valva. This is the John Valva show now. Is a former guest on Alumless, by the way. His question, last one, is that institutions' results provided in comparison benchmarked with everyone else's. Howard?
So in the current iteration, it's used looking at the reports side by side. Yes, we have desired at some point to offer a benchmarked version of this, but I think that is part of our growth trajectory. And for now, it's left eye report, your report, and right eye, the national report, and then comparing them that way. But we do want to get to that place where we're able to offer that, but that's not what we have right this moment. So John, thank you for previewing our growth pattern.
That's what we're high-fiving about in 3 years.
Exactly.
I'm going to add to the conversation about the annual gift, the unrestricted fund conversation, and all that. And one of the things, Bonnie, we'd love you. This is off script, Bonnie. I do this sometimes to folks, but one of the things that came out of this report is that encouraging alumni to give through the institution to causes that matter instead of to the institution for things that are more institutional based. And I love that language. I think it was in the write-up, Howard, that you put together. But Bonnie, to me, that made complete sense. The through the institution, not to the institution, especially for our younger audiences.
I couldn't agree more, Chris. It also correlates with what we see in our feasibility study answers from individuals. The focus, it's not that loyalty is dead, but that's just not the motivator.
Right.
It's looking at impact. What impact will I have by making this gift? How will I move the needle? How will I help a student research some big, a big issue that we're facing as a country? Those are the kinds of things that donors really of every age are saying now is the most important thing to them about giving. By the way, the other thing that motivates them, that's number one. Number two is that they trust the leadership of the institution. And number three, that it's fun. This should be fun. And I think a lot of other nonprofits that have been doing really support from younger alums have figured that out. And I'm not so sure that our experiences that we offer bring some joy to it. And in the end, really, a joyful donor is what you want to end up with, when someone really feels that what they're doing makes a difference.
Yep. Amen. I'm going to throw one to Sarah here and try to get us caught up. And Ryan texted me on the back channel, and we're doing the full audible. We're going live for the full hour. So I love it. I hope it's okay with our guests. But Sarah, this one's for you. What surprised you most about the findings from the National Alumni Survey the past 2 years? But then I'm going to give you two-parter only. Let's get practical again. As how should advancement teams reframe how they think about their alumni and generosity in general? Give us the take that you've seen. What surprised you, and how should we reframing this thinking?
Yeah, and thanks, Chris. To be honest, I think, and maybe this is a little bit answer is a bit different than what you might expect. First, I think, if I'm honest, we were a little bit surprised by maybe how little some of the schools did with the findings. And I hesitate to say that. I don't want to sound critical or negative, because I get it. I mean, there's so much going on, a lot of distractions, a lot of other important priorities. We know that staff are stretched, but it does feel like a missed opportunity. From our perspective, the survey is a dynamic event, one for alums kind of near and far, and it's a legitimate engagement touch point, and one that obviously we can learn a lot from, especially when there's a real commitment to the project. And there are so many positives in the findings. So, as Howard's already referenced, you've touched on, the survey highlights this incredible spirit of philanthropy. So nearly 60% of alumni volunteer, 80%, nearly 80% make charitable donations. So there's all of this generosity. And again, as you've flagged, that the challenge is most alums are directing their gifts, whether it's time, talents, financial support. And that's probably another conversation about what we're sort of counting and including, but that generosity is sort of flowing to other causes or organizations. I think, just to piggyback on what Bonnie just spoke about, as we think about why that is, it feels like it's because the giving opportunities match up with, again, this sort of recurring theme of, what do alums care about? What matters to donors and alumni? And when that's the case, when the right match is made, things like student debt, for example, don't have to be sort of a roadblock or an obstacle. Again, if we draw on the NAS data, 80% of recent grads donate because they are passionate about the cause. So that passion ranks higher than any other influence or factor, including student debt. And so maybe part of the thought about reframing is, again, how do we better connect the dots between the issues and causes alumni are passionate about, and the work and impact happening at or through, as you would say, our institutions. And so again, there's just so much rich intelligence and content and data that comes from a project like NAS. And, we just are eager to put that into action. And again, help the data help us focus, prioritize, really bring some clarity to some of the efforts that are happening at institutions across the country. So again, not to sound negative or critical, but we really are excited about folks who are eager to use all of that actionable data, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely does make sense. And so does the notion that perhaps partners hadn't done as much with the data as you might imagine or hope, right? This is something of a slow field to evolve. But Bonnie, I wanted to ask you about advice that you have for clients, with the understanding of the knowledge that we're getting from the National Alumni Survey. How do you talk to vice presidents of advancement, development leaders, annual giving leaders about maybe what they should be doing differently as a result of what we now know through some of the data that we're getting?
Great. Ryan, and I would say that this has just made me think that one of our responsibilities and one of the ways that our firm in particular can contribute to this effort is our own survey work that we do now. We try to include some very practical next steps for clients to take based on their data. And we might think about, if I were dreaming about what this might look like in a couple of years, to be able to make it even easier for people to do something with the data. So it's the conversation I think we will continue to want to have. But I think on the minds of our clients goes back to something Chris said earlier, and we heard this coming out of the case 50 last meeting, where so much emphasis has been put on, and I think rightly so, on alumni engagement, and yet people are often looking for the immediate payout, and the immediate payout isn't happening. And so I think looking at helping people to see that this is going to take a while to turn the ship around and to be able to give them some early wins in terms of some of the things that Howard described that he's doing at Cal, or finding some space to be able to take an action now to do so. Again, it ends up meaning doing what Sarah was talking about, and that means taking a really clear look at everything that's happening and deciding if you have to do everything as you've been, and being willing to keep the best and modify it based on the changes that you're seeing, and then stop doing some things. I think as a profession, we have a really hard time stopping doing things, and I think we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to change what we're doing, and just the fact that we're listening. I mean, many schools could follow the survey itself up with listening sessions with the various segments in their population to understand better from them what they would like. One of the things that I remember, I think, Sarah, this came out of some of the Schuler work, but that the younger alums really wanted to feel part of something bigger. So the giving was being part of community. And a lot of the work that the Generosity Commission has done to look at the trends, it's not only for colleges, universities, and independent schools, but it's also giving in general has dropped below 50% of American households. It used to be about 66%, and it has dropped. Lots of reasons for that. But one of the practical suggestions coming out of the commission is, how then do we realize that this giving at any level is actually a civic act, and it's part of building community? I think that message is one that I know I've been sharing with clients recently.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was awesome. Sort of moving us ahead here in the conversation, given we've got just a few minutes left in our hour. Howard, I wanted to sort of bring you back in and ask you about, what is the most important thing that you think a college or university can do right now to improve giving?
That's a hard question, because it's right contextual, right? It's like every institution has a different history and different piece. I think that what I would do, and what I try to do every day, is to question myself. Am I doing something because it's the way we've done it, or am I doing something because it's what the data tells me to do? And a lot of times, particularly in annual giving, we're doing because that's the way we've always kind of done it, right? I mean, I think back to 15, 20 years ago, sitting in conference rooms, and at every conference I went to, there was a session, and the session was, the millennials are coming, and they are, we have to change everything, let's do things differently. And then we as an industry did almost nothing. We introduced giving days, I think. And so what I would say folks need to be doing is looking at their direct mail messages, and are we still in a loyalty-based construct, or can we move to a values-based construct, right? The difference between having language around expectation and really making the case, talking about impact in terms of not to the institution, but impact in terms to the world, to the region, to the community, to the students. The navel gazing is killing us, and we've got to bring our eyes up and to be looking at the horizon in different ways. I think that I love this conversation around people using data and using the survey data. I will tell you all, I had to have a little bit of a gut check moment myself in my own program, and I realized that my team didn't know or hadn't thought through yet how we were leveraging our own survey data, including our own participation in this last year. And so we had to sit down and really think about how we're going to start leveraging this data in our annual giving solicitations, how we're going to start leveraging this data with our alumni engagement partners, which led to this beautiful conversation about how we were using other data points from each other between alumni engagement and the annual giving work, right? And so looking for those partnerships, looking for those ways in which we can leverage the data. I'm really, from an annual giving perspective, I'm really fixed on this idea that we have donors who are stuck at giving levels, who are at $1,000 for 5 years, and they're just sitting there and they're just keep getting those levels. And so how can we use engagement activity and data to connect those things and help those folks feel a deeper sense of connection that might move them forward, right? I think that looking at your giving day, and are you just taking your traditional annual fund and dumping it on an online platform and calling that a giving day? I don't think that's it. I think it has to look more micro. It has to look at more specific giving opportunities. I talk about giving days, at least in my campus and in my work, about the democratization of giving, that this is the community's opportunity to speak as a collective about what they care about and to set the priorities for that day. The other thing on giving days too to think about is we have put them into buckets as marketing tools. We should do marketing around them. And we should absolutely, we should do all the things, right? Pull all the levers. But really successful giving days are really community organizing. How are we bringing the community together and bringing all these parts of campus together, not just to celebrate and go, woohoo, we're philanthropic, but to say, how can you leverage your network to be in support of the institution on this day? On this day, how can you bring everyone together in your network to help us do something impossible and something hard? And so, Ryan, as usual, instead of giving you one thing, I've given you like probably 5 half thoughts, but it's a place for people to start. This is all breadcrumbs. We have to follow the breadcrumbs to the next answer, and we can't just sit back and say, well, it's impossible for me to do that. Even within our resource limitations, there are opportunities for us to rethink about how we explain our work. There are ways for us to rethink about how we deploy those resources so that we are doing some of the old, but doing some of the new, because that's what's happening for myself. And that's what I'm trying to do as well. And some days it's hard and some days we don't succeed. But this is about progress, not perfection. And if we are hindered in moving forward because we can't get the right answer right now, we're never going to move forward. So I would say, keep trying, keep testing, keep doing different things, but staying still in stagnation is just only going to get us more of the same.
Let me jump in here real quick, Brian. I know you want to get us toward the end, but one of the things I heard Howard say at the Washburn conference when he gave a great talk on this topic is going back to this restricted giving paradigm issue, is that, Howard, you said that below $1,000, let them give to whatever they want.
Yeah.
And 1,000 and above, we can start to guide them and let them be, more black hole fund kind of, because we're at a certain point in that person's relationship with the institution. There's trust that's been built, et cetera. But that comment alone right there for many institutions is major change, right? Because under $1,000, they need to raise X point, whatever $1 million a year to make their unrestricted goals so that they can turn the lights on. All that BS that comes up. But to me, that's the key, I think, is that let them give where they want at below $1,000. Howard, Sarah, Bonnie, quick response to that.
Let's challenge ourselves. And it does pull. It does not pull from other areas. It actually just increases giving to give folks just in some of that democracy that Howard referenced. And there are ways to connect those passions with what's happening among our students, faculty, the greater community. I mean, if we think about social justice or advocacy or mental health or DEI, some of the areas that recent grads, for example, have identified as most important to them, we can connect those dots. There are ways to align those passion areas with a lot of the meaningful work that's happening through our institutions. And so, I mean, we've got to try some different things. More of the same is doesn't bode well. That's for sure.
Bonnie, jump in.
Oh, I think more of the same isn't that the definition of crazy, right?
Insanity, right? Exactly. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Right.
Awesome. Well, so normally at this part of the show, we do a Friday cheers section and we go around the room and we say something that we're thinking about. But I feel like we've reached the end of our hour. We've had a great live show today, and we'll save Friday cheers for another occasion. Man, I just got the chance to sit back and relax and enjoy what was a fantastic conversation.
It was better that Ryan and I just stayed quiet and let these 3 experts talk about it. So I'll thank Howard, Sarah, and Bonnie for the time today. It was really a fantastic conversation. Just the nature of the chat will tell you that the conversation was rich, and the fact that we had over 140 some odd people pre-register to attend this event. It's our highest number ever. So clearly interest in this. I think it was the guest and the topic, nothing to do with the host. And I already see people jumping in saying great conversation. So thank you to the 3 guests here. Yeah.
Can I just put a big plug in before we end? Because I know
Absolutely.
that your next guest is going to be one of my great colleagues, Carmi Williams, and she's going to be talking about women in philanthropy and also the new program that we're beginning on women in advancement leadership. It's a field that only 35% of the top positions in advancement are held by women. So we're, as a women-owned firm, trying to address that. So just put a plug in to tune in to hear Carmi.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie, for picking that one up. But let me do one other plug. Carmi's going to be fantastic. The women philanthropy program that you got in place for Washburn, if you're interested in that, reach out to Bonnie or myself. We'll get you to the right place to find out more information. But also the final plug, I'll leave to Howard. If you want to participate in this instrument, please let us know. Send me an email, send Howard a note, let us know. There's a form you can fill out online. Howard, what's the easiest, best way for folks to tell you they want to participate in the survey?
They can stay right here on this platform. They can go to the National Alumni Survey LinkedIn page, and the form link is right there on one of the 22 posts I've made about it. So I would just encourage folks to go there and get that expression in that of interest in. It doesn't mean that you're committed to doing it. It means that you and your institution are trying to figure out if you want to do it, and it just kind of helps us start the process to get you all the questions answered that you need answered. So
And Howard, what's the deadline too? I think that's be helpful for people.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get everyone lined up by the end of August. But the sooner that you can get that expression filled out, the better it will be, so that we can get started on the work. There's a lot of interest this year, and we're excited to get rolling.
Sarah, any final comments?
No, just again, really grateful to be part of the conversation and the growth of this project. So grateful for sure to you, Chris, and Ryan, wherever he is, for including me in the conversation. And we look forward.
Frustrated he can't get back in right now. So
yeah, I'd echo that. Thank you, Chris, to you and Ryan for putting this together, giving us a platform to talk about such an exciting project.
We are obviously very excited about it. Thank you again to our sponsors. We work with both Protopia as a sponsor, but Alumni Q as well. They both help us put these shows on. Thank you for it. And on the back end, our new tech audio guy, Dustin Ramsdale, who's joining us on the back end. You haven't seen him yet, but he's going to close us out. Thanks, everybody. So long until next time. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.